I'm so glad to see you all here this morning. Today, we are it's our final week, right, Sammy?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Sammy's speaking next week, so I just wanted to make sure. I gave him the option. You can keep going with Stranger Things, or you can bring something totally fresh. So today is our final week of Stranger Things of Scripture. We have been looking over the past couple of weeks at some of the odd, weird, strange stories of the Bible. This is week 5, and I titled this one, We Have to Talk About the Book of Judges. And the idea that I had for this particular sermon, it has changed over the past 4 or 5 weeks. I had an idea of the different stories I wanted to do. I wanted to end with one story, but then as I kept going with the story and outlining it and putting the sermon together, I realized, this sermon isn't about this story. It's about another story that's right there next to the original story that I was looking at, because if you know anything about the book of Judges, it's one of those books that you read and you have no idea what to do with the book. You ever been there with Judges? You're reading through it and you're like, whoa, this book is, haunting, maybe might be the word, especially the ending of Judges. It has one of the most haunting stories that you will find in the Bible. You can go and read it on your own. Don't want to dive into that one. But Judges, it is clothed in moral ambiguity. There's this moral complexity to the text as you're reading it. And you don't really know what to do with so many of the stories in Judges. I thought it'd be a good ending for our series to talk a little bit about Judges as a whole, and then one particular story about Judges. As I said, this book, this is one of those, you're reading it for a devotional, you're like, how is this devotional material? Because these stories in there, maybe you need a refresher on Judges. I don't know, don't read it for Christmas. Maybe wait till the new year or something like that. Don't even start your new year with Judges. Wait till you get to like February or March or something like that. Or like the doldrums of the summer, maybe August. I don't know. But what we find in Judges from the beginning to the end, it's the degradation of society because there's no proper leadership. No one is leading the Israelites, and so society continues to spiral downwards until you get to the very ending when it is at the lowest of the lows. And here's a little background to Judges. It is this transitional period. The Israelites have escaped from Egypt. They've been wandering in the wilderness. They've entered into the promised land. And now they're trying to figure out, well, how are we going to govern ourselves? So I have here some of the questions. Wrong way here. Who will lead or govern us? How will we protect ourselves in the land? Because at this point, we're in that transitional period where there is no monarchy. We know a king will eventually come. We have Saul, we have David, Solomon, who we looked at a couple of weeks ago. But we're in this period where they're trying to figure the thing out, trying to figure out how they want to organize themselves and who will lead them. And one of the main ideas of the book of Judges is we need a king. Obviously, if you know how the whole king thing goes, that doesn't really work out so well. But before they even get to the king, the Israelites are saying, we need someone who can bring us together, organize us, and then lead us in a proper way. What we find in the book of Judges is this endless cycle. There's sin. The Israelites aren't following the way of God, the way in which God desires for them to live. We have some punishment when a local tribe comes and threatens their existence, threatens to take them over. So the Israelites cry out, as we see all throughout the Bible, and God sends a judge, call it a local chieftain. This isn't judge like with a gavel. This is someone who has been raised up in order to save and rescue the Israelites. So the Israelites are in a position where they cry out, they need some help, they need some rescue. God raises someone up, raises a judge up, who then leads the Israelites in battle. They rescue the Israelites from whoever this invading tribe happens to be. And then we're told there is peace in the land. We see this cycle all throughout Judges. There's peace, then the Israelites revert back to their ways, like we all do because we're human. You get to that point in life when it seems like everything is good, and then you kind of fall back to some old ways. You ever been there before? So that's what the book of Judges is all about. Now, what we have here at the end of the book of Judges is this refrain that is constantly repeated. This is actually how the book ends. In those days, Israel had no king. Remember, Judges is about why we need a king. Again, the assessment of a king, not so great, but we're pre-king at this point. Judges ends with this verse. Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. 4 times towards the end of the book, we have, in those days, Israel had no king. They're making it very clear what the author is trying to say here, the commentary on how the Israelites are doing at this time. Then we have twice this phrase, everyone did as they saw fit. Another way to translate this, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And then Judges ends. Now, this phrase right here, I want to look at this for a moment because I think this is really, really important. And I think this is something for us to reflect on. What I think the author is saying here by using this phrase, it's about this self-centered perception of the world. And when you are doing right by your own eyes in what feels right to you, there is this inability to see the whole. Because you're so focused on yourself, where you're going, how this might benefit you, or maybe even a small group of people, but there's this inability to see how your actions, how your behaviors are affecting everybody else. You're not able to see the effect that some action is having on all of society. So when everyone is doing as they see fit, when everyone is doing what was right in their own eyes, well, the people are unable to see what is happening to society as a whole. And what we said about the book of Judges is that the society continues to degrade as the story goes on. And I think it's because everyone is doing what they see fit. Everyone, maybe we could say, is out to benefit themselves. They're unable to look at the larger picture. I mean, this is what's happening in Judges, and so they desire a king, someone who will come and lead them in a way that is good for all society. I mean, I think that is what we all long for. We just had an election day here in our country, and when we vote, when we elect leaders, I think the majority of us want someone to be appointed in a position that is going to benefit all people. And I think sometimes we get caught up in this way of voting or looking at our leaders of how is it going to benefit me? And we forget, well, what are the effects that this policy might have on other people? So what we're seeing in Judges is that everyone is doing the things that will benefit themselves. And so there's this desire for someone to lead everyone in a way that is good for the whole. Here we go. I already talked about that slide. I realized I had 52 slides this week. I think we got through like 12 of them. I finished it and I was like, whoa. All right, so we'll skip that one. So we only have 51 slides. Now, let's look at the story of Jephthah, which is right about in the middle of Judges. And Jephthah is one of these stories. If you know this story, this is one that you typically avoid because you have no idea what to do with the story. Well, I want to help you show what you do with this story. Now, Jephthah was one of the judges in the book, and he was selected to lead the Israelites against the Ammonites. Now, Jephthah is about to go into battle, and he wants to prove his loyalty to Yahweh before the battle. Here's what happens. This is Judges 11, starting in verse 30. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's. I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. Then Jephthah went over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from Aroer to the vicinity of Minnith, as far as Abel-keramim. Thus Israel subdued Ammon. Now, when Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter? Dancing to the sound of timbrels, she was an only child. Except for her, he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and he cried, "Oh no, my daughter, you have brought me down. I am devastated. I've made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." "Well, my father," she replied, "you've given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised. Now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites. But grant me this one request. Give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry. You may go, he said. He let her go for 2 months. She and her friends went to the hills and wept because she would never marry. After the 2 months, she returned to her father. He did to her as he had vowed. This is a disturbing story. There's no other way of looking at it. There's no other way of describing it. This is one of the more disturbing stories that we will find in the Bible, as what we find all throughout the book of Judges. Especially, this is even more disturbing because it's as if God is behind this story, as if God is orchestrating the story and how it is taking place. So, what is happening in this story? I want to give you a particular way to view this story and the book of Judges as a whole. As we read this story, there are two important background pieces that we have to be paying attention to. We miss these two parts, we miss what's happening in the story. Sometimes we read through scripture so quickly, we miss some of these details. If we miss these 2 points in the story, we will miss what's happening and what the author is trying to say. Here's the first detail of the story. Who knows Chemosh? No takers on this one. All right. I think it's a good thing that you don't know Chemosh. If anyone did, I'd be worried. All right. Now, Chemosh was one of the ancient gods. It was the god of Ammon, who Jephthah was fighting against. Before the battle, before Jephthah goes into battle, here's what we're told. Judges 11, verse 23. This is before the part that we just read. And this is Jephthah speaking to the Ammonites. Since the Lord, the God of Israel, has driven the Amorites, the cousins of the Ammonites, of course, out before his people Israel, what right have you, Ammonites, to take it over? Will you not take what your God, Chemosh, gives you? Likewise, whatever the Lord our God has given us, we will possess. In the ancient world, yes, it was army versus army. It was tribe versus tribe, but it was bigger than that. Whenever anyone would go out to fight in the ancient world, it was one tribe or nation's God versus that tribe or nation's God. Whichever tribe or nation came out on top, it was believed that that tribe's God was more powerful. So yes, you fought for your people, but ultimately you were hoping that your God would be stronger and more powerful and give you victory. What we have here in this story, it's this setup. You have Yahweh, God of the Israelites, versus Chemosh, God of the Ammonites. In the ancient world, how did you prove your loyalty to Chemosh? Through child sacrifice. What do we see happening with Jephthah in this story? Child sacrifice. You miss that detail, you miss what is going on in the story. Jephthah made this vow. Now, here's something really interesting. Who was he expecting to come out of his door? Because singing, celebrating after a victory was a job for the women. We see this all throughout the Bible. After the Exodus, after David wins a victory, it was the women who came rushing out of their homes to celebrate with music and with singing. So Jephthah made this vow knowing full well it's either my wife or my daughter, because we're told he had no other sons or daughters. Jephthah makes this, call it a reckless vow, knowing full well, it's going to be one of the women who's coming out of my house, which makes this even more disturbing. So the question at the heart of this story is, is Yahweh like Chemosh? Does Yahweh desire, we could say maybe require, child sacrifice in order to gain his favor? One of the ideas we have all throughout the Old Testament is our God, the God of Israel, is our God like all the other gods? We see what all these other people are doing. I mean, that was one of the commandments as they were entering into the land. Don't follow these other gods. And yet what we see time and time again is that the Israelites take their view of God, their perception of God, from the surrounding nations. They see what all these other nations are doing, and they begin to think that they must replicate those customs, beliefs, and rituals. And all throughout the story, we have Yahweh saying, I'm not like those other gods. This is what you've seen. This is what you've heard. But I tell you, I'm a different type of God. And the sacrifices, the things that all these other nations are doing, you are not to participate in them, but the Israelites are human. And they look at their surrounding culture and allow culture to define who God is and what God is like. So at the heart of the story is this question, well, is Yahweh really like Chemosh? Does Yahweh require child sacrifice in order to prove your loyalty and to give you victory over the other nations? Now, let's look at the important background note number 2. Again, you miss these details, you miss the story. Right before the portion that we read in verse 29, notice what happens. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah. Jephthah said, I'm going to go into battle. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah. He crossed Gilead. Manasseh passed through Mizpah, Gilead. From there, he advanced against the Ammonites. And then he made a vow. Do you see the order here of what's happening? Again, very, very important. God was already with Jephthah before he made his reckless vow. The Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah. God was already with him. Then he makes this vow. See, Jephthah thinks that if he were to make this vow, then God would be with him. But what we find in the story here is that, well, God was already with Jephthah. The vow wasn't necessary in order to prove his loyalty to God. We can pause here for a moment. You ever feel like you must perform in a certain way? You ever feel like you must sacrifice something, you must prove something in order to earn God's favor? In order for God's presence, God's grace to be upon you? I mean, what we find here in the story is, well, God was already with Jephthah. Then he made this stupid, reckless vow, replicating what all the other nations are doing. It's as if you could hear God crying out in agony and pain. No, I've been telling you I'm different. I've been telling you that what these other nations are doing, it's not the way to understand the true and living God. And yet here is Jephthah again, just doing what all the other nations are doing. What this story shows is how easily we can lose sight of the true God. It is very easy for us in our lives to lose sight of the true God. 3 ways we do this. The God of your own eyes. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes versus, I'll call it collective eyes. And what I mean by collective eyes is living in community. When it's you isolating yourself, trying to figure out God on your own, you can go off track a bit. This is why church, community group, getting together with others and wrestling with Scripture and God and faith and life is so important. We need each other. When you are in a silo of your own beliefs, that's when things can easily go off the rails. Everyone is doing what was right in their own eyes instead of gathering together and allowing others to challenge their beliefs, question their beliefs, have a conversation. I hear what you're saying, but let me throw out my perspective on this, and then together, maybe we can come to an understanding of who God is. And of course, we'll never have a full understanding of God, but I think collectively we can get a little bit closer than individually on our own. Here's another way. Blind obedience. So if we're already off track, think about Jephthah. He already thinks God is a particular way. So now he's just blindly obeying, but he's not critically reflecting on his faith. I think what we find this is why we're here on Sunday mornings, and what we find within the Bible is it's a faith that we want to question and probe and explore. We read the Bible in order to understand who God is, because on our own, and sometimes we go off the path and we explore Scripture because we believe that as we open this ancient book, in some way we will be challenged and transformed. I call it a seeking faith. Here's Jesus, Sermon on the Mount. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek, you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. Jesus is inviting us into this seeking type of faith, this knocking and asking type of faith. As you ask, not just once, as you seek, as you knock, eventually you will find. But Jesus doesn't say, well, once the door is open, then all right, that's it. There's no more doors to open. No. It's just keep knocking, keep seeking. So rather than a blind obedience where you have these blinders on and you say, this is how it is, you see everything black and white, what we're being invited into, I think, is this critical, reflective type of faith. And then here's a third way that we lose sight of the true God: crafting a view of God or morality through the surrounding culture instead of the person of Jesus. If we want to understand the true God, we look to the person of Jesus. Jesus being the full representation of God. You want to know what God is like? How is Jesus? How did Jesus interact with people? What did Jesus teach? Too often, I think we look at TikTok for our view of God. We look at the surrounding culture instead of looking to Jesus. And if we want to understand what God is like, we must question through the lens of Jesus. Does this look like Jesus? If yes, well, then I would suggest that is what God is truly like. If it doesn't match up with who Jesus was, what Jesus taught, then maybe we need to discard that view. Now, here's how the story concludes. From this comes the Israelite tradition that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. Here's one author's summary of the story. Jacob L. Wright in his book, Why the Bible Began. The narrator reports it became a custom every year the daughters of Israel would go out and commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. The festival these women created honors her courage. What do we remember about this story? We're not honoring Jephthah. We're honoring the courage of his daughter. Meanwhile, what preserves Jephthah's memory is an account that pillories his thirst for power. He's not seen in a flattering light. It's as if he disappears, and now his daughter comes to the forefront of this story. A few thoughts for reflection this morning. What are we willing to sacrifice in our individual or collective pursuit of power? Jephthah wanted victory. He knew it was either his wife or his daughter who would come out of the door. In our individual or our collective pursuit of power, what are we sacrificing? What's really interesting in the book of Judges is that Jephthah's daughter does not have a name. What we find in the book of Judges, in the beginning, the women are named. We have women judges. Yet as the book goes along, the names disappear. And the women go unnamed. This is very, very important. In the beginning, the women are strong. They're powerful. They're leaders. They're judges. They come and they rescue Israel, but then it's as if their power and their strength begins to evaporate. As morality spirals downward, women become victimized in man's pursuit of power. Here's what we see in the book of Judges. Jacob L. Wright again, the book depicts the dismantling of the body politic via the violence that men perpetrate on women's bodies. It begins with women as heroes who save the day. It ends with them as victims who suffer unspeakably from the nation's own leaders. Throughout the narrative, women serve as canaries in the coal mine. When they are strong and enjoy agency, the nation is thriving. But when they are reduced to silence and violated, the reader knows that, to adapt a line from Hamlet, there is something rotten in the state of Israel. I mean, I read this. I have never seen Judges through this perspective before. But if you know the book and how it moves along, to me, this makes so much sense. Here's our question: who gets sacrificed in our pursuit of power? It's the unnamed, the vulnerable, the powerless. We're seeing people vying for power in this book, and great harm is being done on the unnamed and the powerless and the vulnerable in the book of Judges. Linkin Park has this line in one of their albums that when I first heard it, I mean, this is one of those lines that has just stood out to me. I forget when this album came out. I think it was like 2004 or something. So going on like 20 years. When the rich wage war, it's the poor who die. And I remember hearing this line, and it just, I mean, that was a haunting line. And that line has stayed with me. Obviously, it stayed with me enough that it made it into this sermon. Because as I was thinking about Judges, this line, it just kept coming to mind. The poor suffer. When the rich wage war, it's the poor who die. Think about what's happening in our country right now. We have leaders vying for power, and who is suffering? People are losing access to food, housing, healthcare, education. It's the people at the top, and they're not worried about these things. Yet it's the poor. Everyone's doing right in their own eyes. The inability to see the whole as we thirst for power, be it political power, for money, for prestige, who ends up being sacrificed along the way? It's the vulnerable. And so we have a society that is spiraling downward because there are some who desire more power, or to make sure that their voice is the loudest, or that they win out. And those at the bottom are the ones who suffer. I would suggest that children, as evidenced in this story in Judges, children are especially vulnerable in our pursuit of power. Power being money, prestige, influence. It's the children who suffer the most. Here's a book I read about 2 years ago. It's called The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt. And this book highlights the immense societal harm that we have placed on our kids because of social media. Social media is a giant experiment. Social media has never existed before until I don't even remember how long it's been in existence, 20 years maybe. So we're in the experimental phase. And unfortunately, it's the children who are suffering the most because of this experiment, especially young girls. Their perception of themselves, mentally, how it's affecting them. Also that a select group of people can, have like another $1 billion in their pocket when they already have a few billion in their pocket. So we have some at the top who want more, and they don't care who gets hurt along the way. And it's our children who are suffering the most because of this massive experiment that we have no idea where it's going to go. But our children are the ones who are suffering. So let's end this sermon with some hope. I have a friend of mine, one time I ended a sermon on a downer, I guess. He listened to it and he said, you got to offer some hope. So we've been down here this morning, and we have to end with some hope because I have to lift your spirits before we leave here, because I could tell the whole feeling of the room was like, oh no, I don't go to church for this. So disregard everything I said. Let's end with this question. What is the better path forward? Because we need a better path forward. Philippians 2, Paul speaking about Jesus. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if you have any tenderness or compassion within you, even an ounce of it, he is making his plea, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition. Nothing out of everyone doing what is right in their own eyes, or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. When a judge was raised up, there would be temporary peace. Jesus, the ultimate rescuer, the ultimate bringer of peace. How was this peace established? Love and sacrifice. So what is the better way forward? It's love. Love for our neighbor. Love for all people. It's sacrifice, and not sacrifice in a way where other people get harmed along the way. We're talking about self-sacrifice, not feeling as if you have to win at all costs. Humbling yourself. It's about humility. This passage is known as the kenosis passage. Kenosis being the word meaning self-emptying, a giving of yourself for the healing of the world. This is how Jesus brought ultimate peace to our lives, to this world. We live into that peace as we give of ourselves for others, as we love, and as we think about the whole of society, and as we try to move all of us forward in a way that is good for everyone. So what is the better path forward? What is the hope for us to take home this morning? Walk in the way of Jesus, the way of love, and not sacrificing others in your thirst for more, but being okay with enough, and then giving of yourselves so that others can experience peace and love in their lives.